First of all, thank you for everyone who's joined in and who's watching. Thank you to all the panelists who've joined us, and welcome to our webinar event, Racism and Hate Crime Online. So my name is Cormac Hanrahan, and I work for West Ham United Foundation. And my role is to lead on the club's Stop the Hate programme. And through Stop the Hate, we aim to increase awareness around racism, discrimination and prejudice, and empower participants with the knowledge to safely challenge and report these issues. And we've come together today to discuss racism and hate crime online, as there has been a proliferation of racist and hateful incidents. For example, 50% of Black and minority women have reported experiencing online abuse. In addition to this, there have been many high-profile racist incidents on social media in the last year, with 3,000 abusive messages being sent to 44 footballers in just a 6-week period. We are living in an increasingly digital world, with technology and social media becoming our primary source of human contact, even more so with lockdown restrictions nationwide. And because of this, our behaviour and conduct online is as important as it has ever been. And today we'll discuss these topics, and I'm delighted to introduce you to our co-host and police constable, Suzanne Stanbrook, who will introduce herself.
So, hi and welcome everybody. So, as Cormac's already mentioned, my name's Suzanne. I'm a police officer over on what is now called the East BCU. So it's a basic command unit which covers Havering, Barking and Dagenham and Redbridge. I am a hate crime coordinator. So my role is to look at exactly what Cormac's just expressed, you know, one of the biggest and rising issues that sits not only within the east of London, but within the Metropolitan Police as a whole. You know, we are doing our utmost to tackle it. It's not just a London issue, it's countrywide. It's something that that we need to do to bring together more people and talk about this subject in order for us to, you know, eradicate it from you know, not only football but our lives in general, because you know, my hope is that we wouldn't have to sit here in 10 years time and have this same conversation. You know, I'd like to hope that we've been successful in educating everybody in the need to be kind, and I think that's what it boils down to. So that's, you know, my role in a sort of a nutshell. So I'll pass you back to Cormac.
Absolutely, thank you, Suzanne. And we're really excited to have a number of guests and a number of panelists with us today to discuss these issues. So first of all, we're joined by Councillor Darren Rodwell, who's the leader of Barking and Dagenham Council, and we're hoping Governor B will join us at some point. And we're also joined by Joseph Lyons, who is West Ham United Foundation CEO and leader of the Second Curve Network. And moreover, we're joined by Leroy Rosenior, MBE, former professional footballer and manager, producer and pundit for Premier League Productions, and anti-discrimination educator. Leroy currently also delivers our Stop the Hate programme, which is run in collaboration with Show Racism, The Red Card, who he's vice president of. And just to kickstart our discussion today about these issues, our first question is, what is racism and hate crime online? And Suzanne, I thought you'd be a good person to come to for that question to begin with, because you might be able to give us some really valuable insights into what racism and hate crime, what constitutes racism and hate crime online.
So hate crime itself is made up of 5 characteristics, race being one of them, disability, sexual orientation, gender identity and faith. Obviously today we're going to concentrate on racism. Now, a hate crime is a perceived crime, which you know means that if you are called a derogatory name in relation to any of those characteristics, that would be perceived as a hate crime and therefore be reported as such. It can be a third-party report. It could be something that you see at a football game, for example, in the supermarket. And I think that that's where we need to sort of highlight that it can happen anywhere. And online is now becoming more prolific because these keyboard warriors that we seem to have now in this digital age, who hide behind a screen and think that it's their given right to express an opinion that you know is not welcome within our world. So it's a rising crime that we do need to look at. I think the pandemic has obviously driven many of us back into our homes, back onto Teams, back onto Zoom. I don't know about you, but I can't remember the last time I had actually spoke to a human being rather than somebody via Zoom. It becomes a faceless crime online, which is something that we need to also tackle, because just because it's faceless doesn't make it right. So that's hate crime. So to commit a hate crime, if you use a derogatory term towards somebody with any of those 5 characteristics, whether it be online, and that could be social media, online platforms, gaming, or in the street, at the cinema, at a football game, it's a hate crime, and it will be reported as such.
Absolutely, thank you for that insight, Suzanne, and completely agree that that point that regardless of whether there's a face to it or not, whether it's in person or not, something hateful is exactly the same whether it's committed online or whether it's in person. So Darren, I'll come to you next on this one. What are your thoughts on what is hate crime and what is racism and hate crime online?
Wow, it's really sad to say that the leader of the so-called free world was probably one of the biggest perpetrators of it up until a few weeks ago. I got into politics to get rid of extreme right-wing viewpoints. I don't like extreme left-wing viewpoints, because if you're in an extreme, you won't accept others for who they are. And the problem with online hate crime is it feels a lot more personal, because the language being used is a lot more direct normally, and it is coming into your home, it's coming into your safety net. And that may sound a bit bizarre, but many young people I speak to, including my own family, may I say, I have a mixed race son, and my other son finds it really difficult on language which is used about me, which is bizarre, because you'd never think that would happen to me, because I'm everything you would think that people would accept. But actually, no, I'm also a politician these days, they call it. So the stuff that comes through is very, very personable. So a lot of my family now don't use Facebook or Twitter or any of these other brands to get their messaging, because they don't like to see what actually happens. So I think we, as local government, regional government, national government, but internationally, need to say to the online community that you've got to start to understand what you're doing. And if you're not prepared to do something about it, and we've seen this with Facebook and Twitter, just using those two, then actually, like we've got a World Health Organization and we've got the World Bank and we've got these other structures, then we need to look at a World Digital Organization, because I can't understand how the hate that we see, and it's so virile on, I mean, even in West Ham, and I'm a massive West Ham fan, again, people I get ashamed on some of the comments I've seen with people that have the West Ham logo in their media profile. I think it's an absolute disgrace. You're not a West Ham fan if you believe those types of views, because we are a multicultural club with multicultural views, and we should celebrate our diversity. So I think it is very personalized, but I do think it's all of us coming together. As I always say, West Ham, we're united against hate crime, and especially online.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Those are some really pertinent points there. I particularly liked your point about World Digital Organization. That's the first time I've heard that idea, but that seems like it's certainly got
West Ham always lead, so we should carry on.
yeah, absolutely. Leroy, I'll come to you next, because I've worked with you for a number of months now, and I know you have some very thought-provoking comments on this topic. So what's your opinion about racism and hate crime online?
Well, firstly, before the first I could kind of deal with it a lot easier. But when I started working for the BBC, I started doing a show called The Football Leacher. And
Leroy, sorry, Leroy, we're just struggling to hear you a little bit, Leroy.
Oh, sorry.
Right, I think you might be back now.
Well, go to Joe first, and I'll try and get.
Yeah, good idea. Yeah, good idea, Leroy. Good idea. So Joe, what about
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah,
I can come in there. So, to be honest, I think the experience you're going to hear from Leroy and kind of the political or definitely some of the suggestions and ways forward you'll hear from other guests is different to kind of my approach, because I think that with these type of subjects, looking at something so deep and personable as hate crime, especially around racism, I think it's about the roles and responsibilities that we all have in this. Now, I could go off on a tangent talking about my own personal involvement with organisations and what, but really in terms of West Ham United Foundation and what we're here to do, it's to help educate. And Suzanne said it at the beginning in her introduction. Our role, because of who we are, and we call it a unique opportunity. We have a unique opportunity as West Ham's charity to reach communities, to reach young people, whether or not it's West Ham. Cormac, you tell me, you go into a school, right? And how many out of the 30 kids or the 150 kids in a year are West Ham fans? I would love to say all of them, but the likelihood is it's spread across many different other footballing colours. Now, that doesn't really matter, does it? Because you see the way in which we can engage conversations. And obviously, look, part of this is around meeting Leroy for the first time many years ago now, and just seeing him in action in terms of his communication skills, how he can relate to young people. And it's not just Leroy, it's yourself, Cormac, and everyone else with a West Ham badge that goes into these schools and can really break through some of the problems. Now, I'm not going to attribute what I'm about to say all to Darren, but Darren talks very easily around kind of the armchair racists and the older communities, and we're faced with that. And I remember Darren said to me very early on when I met him nearly 8 years ago, is that where do you put your energy? Into those people or into the younger communities who can influence? And I think for us it's really important. I think, and actually West Ham aren't going to solve this problem on our we are part of the system, which there are multiple people, multiple stakeholders involved in trying to get a voice out there around something similar to stop the hate, right? So, and that's our responsibility. I've got my own views on social media, and I've got my own views on the good and the bad that it is produced over the last decade or so. And I think realistically, are you going to stop social media? And then the answer is no, and that's the next way forward. And I think Darren's right in terms of a worldwide organisation, or something needs to be in place to control people's freedoms of speech, or put a consequence to it. But again, I'm not a social media expert, so I'm not going to comment on that. I just think in terms of how we approach these subjects, how we can support the likes of the Met Police and Suzanne and her colleagues, it has to be around education, and it has to be about using the power that we have and the voice we have and the platforms we have to cut through. And look, part of the conversation for us now internally that we're having is that West Ham can only really work in West Ham areas for obvious reasons. But we're one of a family of over 90 football clubs that have incredible engagement through all of the corridors of this country, right? So any road, any A road, M25 road, all of that, it goes to another football club. And I think that's the collective piece. And I love the work of Show Race and the Red Card. I love some of the messaging coming out of Pick It Out. I love the new strategies around no room for racism from the Premier League. But when you put that at the top and then you say, well, is it being delivered down nooks and crannies of Barking and Dagenham. And how is it getting into those communities? It is via the community organisations of football clubs, other mediums that are getting voices out there and getting their message out there. So I think this is a difficult task, a hugely difficult task to make sure, but it has to be orchestrated in a way that's a collaborative approach.
Yeah, absolutely. And to answer one of your earlier questions, Joe, is how many people in schools are West Ham fans? Unfortunately, it's still a minority of people.
As Darren will say, though, with Champions League in the future, who knows where that will go? Eh?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're very happy. We've also been joined by Governor B now. I'll come to you in a moment, Governor. But just to give him an introduction to him, Governor B is an award-winning rapper and author, and his latest book, Unspoken, is planned for release on the 18th of February, where he gives an inspirational account of his journey. And I'm sure we're likely to touch on that journey today. But first, Leroy, I'll go back to you first to see how we can, what you think about racism and hate crime online.
Yeah, okay. I mean, my first experience of it was working in television, because I used to do a show on the BBC called the Football League Show, and the BBC wanted me to go on Twitter. I didn't have any idea, but as soon as I came off air, the amount of abuse that I got was incredible. And Dan was right. It felt personal. I'd been through a lot. Playing the game, I'd been screamed at by thousands of people, racially abused by thousands of people, but one person in one bedroom with the touch of a button really did hit hard. And so for me to continue to do that show in a way where I felt comfortable, I came off Twitter because I just felt it kind of affected everything that I did, everything that I said. And from since then, I've always felt that it needed to be Twitter, Facebook, all these things. They don't seem to have a value. And what I mean by that is that people can go on it and say what they want and continue to do so. And what it needs to be regulated. There's absolutely no doubt. I agree with everything that Darren and Joe have said. It needs to be regulated, but it needs to be regulated in a way when people use certain words or certain language that there is a consequence for that. Whether it is they come off Twitter or whether they are suspended and it's investigated, there needs to be a consequence. And the problem with it is that even my kids, they walk around with it with their faces in their phones, and they don't think before they actually start typing. And unlike human beings, but most human beings, we actually think before we talk, before we open our mouths. That's not the same with Twitter. It's not the same with Instagram. They seem to do before they actually understand what they're doing. A lot of people don't, and they're still racist, in all honesty. And Darren's absolutely right. For the President of the United States to get to a point where he's instigated a riot on his own country, for him to then come off Twitter, suggests that regulation isn't in place at the right time. And regulation needs to be in place at the first time that somebody does something. And then it is investigated, and then they are suspended, and then I think it should be a system where it's 1, 2, 3 knockouts, and you are out, you are off that platform, and you are kind of flagged up to other platforms as well for your behaviour, because I find it the most personal thing I've ever come across. I could deal with thousands of people calling me you black this and you black that. I honestly could, but when it was an invisible person, and you are trying to imagine who that person is, it plays all sorts of tricks on your mind. And as an adult, I found that difficult. So as a young person having to go through that, I think that is unacceptable, in all honesty. And all these platforms need to take total responsibility for what they are putting out there, for the platform they put forward. And when they're talking about free speech, I'm all for free speech, but I'm not for hate speech. And when anything kind of creeps into hate speech, it needs to be dealt with, and they are the ones who need to put things in place which deal with it. They need to take responsibility. So I think it's very simple. I work in television. On television, we are not allowed to say certain words. When people say certain words on television, they are sacked. When people do certain things on television, they are gone. You'll see when people go wrong. You've seen it in the media when people go say things wrong in the media. They disappear from the media and not allowed to work within that platform. It needs to be treated in exactly the same way as online, because it is a platform that is available to people who are not professionals. They are just everyday people. But it needs to be treated like that because it has the effect that professionals have in the professional world on media. It has the same effect. It has you influence people in the same way. So it needs to have the same laws and regulations linked to it as television, radio, newspapers, and it has to come into that, and it has to be a part of that media world, because that's what it is. It's media. We talk about YouTube stars, we talk about influencers. They are all media stars, and whether they, fair play to them. I'm really pleased for them. But if they are going to work on that medium, they need to be treated as I do when I work for the BBC or anybody who works within in medium in this world. So I think it's that simple.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for sharing your experiences, Leroy. There's some really powerful messages in there. And to just go off what you said about it being actually more personal sometimes on Twitter and Instagram and all that social media element is, I think, just to exemplify that, sometimes now we're seeing celebrities, if they put a tweet out or a post out, they turn comments or turn replies off. So they're actually living in fear a little bit of getting a hateful response, which is absolutely unacceptable. And this leads us on to our next question quite well. And Guvna B, I'll bring you in on this one. Our next question is how is racism and hate crime being committed online? And I know you have quite a strong social media presence. So how do you think racism and hate crime is being committed online?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I'm a rapper. A lot of my music videos and that kind of stuff goes online, and I think, making an assumption or negative judgment on someone purely because of the color of their skin isn't a new thing. It's always been wrong, but I think in the online space, it's made it worse. When I was in school, if someone was racist or said something hateful, there were consequences for those actions. You get in trouble, you get detention, you get suspended, or you get punched to the face. And I'm not condoning violence in any way, shape, or form. But I'm just saying that when you're racist online, it's been said on this call already, or hateful online, there's not as many consequences. And when there's no consequences, people have no fear. And when you have no fear, you can say whatever you want. And it's a dangerous thing. I think the confusing thing for me on how it's committed online. So I'll give an example. I did a freestyle for a music brand called DRM Daily, and it was this freestyle called A Daily Duppy. And I mentioned about how important it is to have faith, whether you're a Christian, Muslim, whatever, don't believe in anything, faith represents hope. And someone commented saying that because I said that, they're going to find out where I live and put a letter bomb through my door. And it was confusing for me because, I'm not one of these rappers that promote negative messages. I don't talk about violence and all that kind of stuff. I'm actually quite positive. So I was thinking that if it could happen to me, someone that's relatively positive, then it's happening to a lot more people online, and there's no way of it being policed. And I think the dangerous thing about that is, for anyone that it affects, the mind is a powerful thing. I'm very lucky that I had people in my life that challenged my mind. My primary school teacher telling me I was a good writer, that made me believe in myself, or my mum telling me that if I work hard, I could achieve good things. All those things kind of resulted in me believing in myself. Now, just as positive messages can have an impact on our mind, so can negative messages. So even if it's someone saying my music's not good or I look funny, that's fine, I can deal with that. But for someone hating someone because of the color of their skin or because they're different, it can have a negative impact on the mind. And as much as I'm a strong person, if it can have an impact on me, I know it's having an impact on thousands of others. So I think there's two things. We have to be careful what we expose ourselves to in the online space. I always tell young people that I mentor and work with, don't just follow everyone, because all of those opinions and all of those thoughts will have an impact on your mind and an impact on how you feel about yourself. But on the other hand, it's not actually our responsibility to take on. It's not the victim's responsibility. I think the most important thing is we've got to be careful how we speak about each other. I've toured all around the world, and it's crazy the amount of people that I've met that have been, suicidal at some point in their lives, or struggled mentally because of what's been said about them on social media. And I just think we've got to be kinder to each other, because it definitely has an impact on us. And yeah, so I think it's hateful comment, it's hateful speech, it's not thinking about how we're making other people feel. I think the crazy thing about the online space is, I think it's been mentioned before as well, anyone can say anything, and you don't even have to have like a real profile. Most of the negative comments that I've seen have been people hiding behind these weird cartoon avatars and emojis and that kind of stuff. And I don't know why there's not regulation. I don't know why you don't have to upload your passport or your driving license to verify who you are so it can be traced back. But I always say, people over money. Money seems to rule the world and rule the decisions that these big organizations make. But if we place people over money, I think we can start seeing the online space being policed a little better. But until that point, I think it's up to us to look in the mirror and look at our lives and who we're challenging, because the reality is social media is just a reflection of society. Okay, it's more sensational because people don't have to answer to anyone, but in our own lives, are we challenging our racist friends? Are we challenging our hateful friends? I think that's what we can do, and that's what we can bring to the conversation. But other than that, I just really hope that there's some kind of verification that takes place, and we start putting the thoughts and the feelings of people above making money.
Yeah, and what you said at the very start about, so I think was really important. What you said about that, to be unambiguously clear, racism isn't a new thing. That's unfortunately always been with us. But what we're faced with now is a new medium in which racism can manifest itself, which we need to learn as a society, as we've all said, to police, to regulate, and to be able to control those elements of it. And Suzanne, I was just wondering whether you've noticed maybe any trends or any patterns in terms of how racism is committed online, or obviously, we have the obvious ones, tweets and comments like that. So what are your thoughts on it?
So again, I think everybody has really sort of kind of touched on the way society has moved on now. And I have a teenage daughter, and again, to get her to have a telephone conversation is almost impossible. But for her to get onto a text message or Snapchat or Facebook, well, actually she's not on Facebook. Might have something to do with her mother. But we aren't really on social media platforms. But if she's going to talk to her friends, they don't have a face-to-face conversation anymore. It is behind a screen. There's that interaction that's being lost. Now, I try and encourage her as much as I can to have voice conversations, because you do have to think before you speak. How easy is it to send an email when someone's maybe sent you something you're not, you don't agree with, and it's a very angry, text back or a very angry response. Once you've hit that, if it's work, then they know who it's come from. But on social media, again, it's that faceless cowardness almost, isn't it? And I think that's the bit that frustrates me the most. It's a cowardice way of responding to something that you don't agree with. Why are we not in a society where we can agree to disagree without being hateful towards each other? Even some people will look at myself, and I think that Darren touched on it really well. As a person in society, how do I understand what racism feels like, or how would I feel what hate feels like? So just to put it into perspective, this may not be a surprise to everybody, but as a police officer, I'm not everybody's best friend. And I put a yellow jacket on when I go up and do protests and police certain sort of marches that are going on, and I will be bold and use my Extinction Rebellion friends, because they were the most recent incident that I had, and it was about poetry, and actually you know, there was some really good sort of writing that had been going on, but every time they had to refer to the yellow jackets and our oppressiveness, and you know, nobody respected the fact that I was there to do the job that I wanted to do for the right reasons. And I think, and that is the only way I can put it into context about how I feel when I could sort of put myself into, you know, it's nowhere near the same as the experiences that Leroy's, and I don't even want to, you know, pretend that it's the same, but that I can feel that hurt, you know, behind that yellow jacket is a person. Actually everything they were saying about me wasn't true. But it didn't hurt any less, you know. But obviously in my position, I can't respond. I can't sort of say to them, you know, well, actually that's not me, or this is who I am. But it is about the education of how do we come together in a conversation. And Governor B, you're doing exactly what you should be doing. You know, we're coming together here tonight to have this discussion, to put ourselves out there on a platform that other people can dial into. We've got no control over who buys the tickets, because I want people to hear my voice. I want people to know that racism within any form of society is not acceptable, and we are doing our utmost. But unfortunately, the social media platforms is something we don't have control over. You know, and that was something that they are trying to push through in the law, is the fact that you know, there was a sort of a blanket thing that went out that none of the social media sites would be responsible for anything that was posted by other members, you know, or by their followers. How is that? How I don't understand how that could even have got passed. And people can set up fake accounts. It makes it very, very difficult for us to trace these people. They know that. You know, so again, it's about taking this conversation to the next level, taking it as high as we need to take it, and as far as we need to take it, to tackle these big corporations who are making it difficult for us to do the educational piece behind stamping out racism, stamping out hate, you know. And I will just had a conversation about it. I intend to push it through my career as hard as, you know, and as fast as I can, because that's why I joined the police. I don't want to hear that language. I want everybody to be accepted in society, be able to go to where they want to go. I also want I want Leroy to be on Twitter. I want him to be able to be, you know, to have those conversations and not get that hate speech back. And that to me would be, you know, that would be my win situation, where anybody can be on any platform without the fear of being insulted in a hateful manner, you know, and especially just because of the colour of their skin. So yeah.
Susan, I really agree with everything you said. One thing you said there, that your experience isn't as bad as maybe Isaac's or mine, but it is, and it's not. It doesn't matter what it is. It's about the personal experience and the effect it has on the individual. That's really, really important. And when you're talking about you have people in positions of power use woke and use political correctness to undermine all that sort of language. That's where the problem is, because it's not about whether, you know, Isaac's got a letter bomb through, or whether I've got thousands of people doing the Nazi salute towards me. It's about the effect it has on the individual. And if it's my daughter, you know, just saying, "Oh, your dress is awful, or it's horrible, you look ugly in that dress," can have the same effect on her as Isaac getting a threat of a letter bomb through his letterbox. And so that's where there's no level where it's acceptable. There is no level where it's acceptable. It's about the effect that Isaac was talking about, you know, people talking about, you know, wanting to commit suicide, you know, but that could come from somebody else might think it's so small. We've got to stop all that language where they think, oh, it's not, that's nothing, or it doesn't matter. You know, you've got to take that on the chin, ignore it. You know, it's just, you know, I'm just having a laugh with you. There has to be, what was really interesting, Isaac was talking about kindness. The thing is, I don't know because I'm not on Twitter, but I feel that when you're kind, you won't get as many likes. You won't get people saying that's really good, that's really lovely. It's when you're hateful, it's when you're outspoken. That's when people start to say, yeah, I agree with that. I'm listening to you. You get as more followers. That's got to stop. As soon as they've made a hateful comment, they come off it. And that's got to be the message that's sent to everybody else who might want to take that sort of, use that sort of language and get more followers by doing that sort of thing. Because that's the society that we live in. We live in a society where kindness isn't valued. It's not valued, you know. It's just, oh yeah, that's normal. But oh, he's interesting. We'll get someone on Question Time who's going to have a ridiculous opinion of someone, because we do that to ourselves. We encourage those people. We give them a platform. You know, we don't have kind people on those things saying things that will collaborate people. We have people who divide people all the time, and we do it to ourselves. So that's where we've got to start. We've got to say that is unacceptable. We're not having anything to do. We're going to cut you off at the knees. We're not going to have that.
Sorry to interrupt. Do you think that, and sort of we'll open this all out. Sorry, Cormac, if I'm moving from the agenda. Reality TV. You say that about, you know, how we almost encourage different people to take on these sort of reality TV shows, and nobody's ever nice. I actually can't watch them. The British Bake Off is as far as I'll go as with a reality TV show, because I can't stand the comments, the undermining of people, the backstabbing comments. You know, and it's, I think that sometimes fuels our youngsters into thinking that is acceptable, because they're seeing it on reality TV, whether it be Big Brother, whether it be, you know, I certainly don't see that language being used in, you know, Portrait Artist of the Year competition, you know, where there are a mixture of cultures and people coming together. And so what makes the TV, I think, companies as well almost encourage that conversation through reality TV, whether it be Love Island, whether it be, you know, you'll have to excuse me, I'm like I say, reality TV, I've sort of, I can't, the speech within it sometimes is, I think, almost inflammatory, and that's what leads to our youngsters thinking that that's acceptable in today's society. So are we looking at a much bigger picture of sort of going further as to where, you know, I think you were quite forgiving in saying, you know, your first comment on Twitter, it's sort of, you know, your yellow card, second comment, you know, maybe your red card, and third, that's it, you're out the game, you can't come back in. Why are we not just cutting it off from the source straight away, you know, just making it unacceptable from the start? I think it's a really, really big message. The minute you say, we're not, you know, we're not allowing you to have followers, we're not allowing you to use that language and be insightful, and also to, you know, to encourage others to follow you. Yeah, I think I you know, might be quite harsh in my approach, but yeah, I think that would, I'd like to see that more often.
What I would say, Susan, is people would argue with you then, oh, you're stopping their free speech, and you know, you're not allowing free speech. But the problem is that people, all those programs you talk about is people kind of buy into people being in distress. They like to see people in distress, and that's why. And the media, and it works. The media, the numbers don't lie, and we've got to stop that. We have to stop that attitude and say, look, this is unacceptable. I mean, was it Love Island where the presenter committed suicide, and then you've got people who go off on the ITV programs, I don't know, and then they commit suicide. The long-term effect of that should mean, you know, what was that program with Jeremy Kyle got taken off because it only got taken off as soon as someone committed suicide. So what does that say? It's just, you know, the level of distress we have to go to when we realize, and this is unacceptable, but we all sit there and we cringe. We know it's unacceptable. And, you know, for young people, you know, you just see young girls and they're getting plastic surgery in their faces, and they all look the same because they've all had the same no disrespect, but they all look the same because they've all had that can't be right when you're getting plastic surgery in your 20s. You know, have wrinkles. Wrinkles are beautiful. You know, grey hair is beautiful.
Oh, thanks, Leroy.
Absolutely. I've got loads of it. But I really am. But the effect of the media on how people think about themselves, the way they look, I just find it really distressful. The most beautiful actresses in the world have not had plastic surgery. You know, they've grown old, beautiful. You know, the Greta Garbo didn't have plastic surgery. Look at her, she was beautiful, but you know, until their 80s or however long she lived for. Those are the sort of messages that we have to promote. And these, by the way, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, that's their responsibility to promote those things as well. And Isaac is right, because it's not just about the money, it's about it's about values as well. They've made enough money now. They've got enough money to now say, we need to have, Facebook should be, it's a brand, and what it represents is good stuff. It's kindness. It's the good things about this world, especially about the pandemic that we've been in. We need to turn it around, and it comes from government. You know, Boris Johnson, when he was asked about Joe Biden, is he woke? My good God, did he blubber? Did you hear that? Because he's been using that language all the time to undermine people who are being kinder. And it's not acceptable.
I was going to, can I come in here? Sorry.
Yeah, go on.
It's upon all of us. Yeah. A number of us on this call are parents. Some of us are even grandparents. And it's how you bring that child up to understand, to respect others. It doesn't matter about wealth. Wealth has no interest in my world. I say that from the poor family in the street. That I'm proud of being. It made me the person I was. I say that as a single parent. When I had nothing, I had to make daddy pizzas, so my daughter had something, but she remembers that fondly, because what she had was love and that respect for others. And she works in a similar area of Suzanne now. She's a PCSO, and I'm very proud of the fact that she's giving back to her community. It's so important. Now, what we've allowed to happen over generations is we've lost the importance of community. All of us playing a part within that one sense of worth. We have been told now, and I say this because most of you are not my age, but I saw that change in the late 70s, early 80s, where we were told the community wasn't important, individuality was. And what we've done is we've bred a load of people, not meaningful to do this, but government's done it. And we've seen that in our politicians. I think that senior politicians should have resigned in a number of things that they've said, including the Prime Minister. I make no bones about it. We all have a responsibility. With our freedoms come responsibility. And if these platforms are not prepared to be responsible with that freedom, then we have no choice but to do collective values. And we could do that in the United Kingdom so easily. We could stop any of these platforms to operate in the United Kingdom. So I've heard, oh no, we can't stop it, they're global. No, they're not. They've still got to come through a channel, whether that's through a Wi-Fi channel or whatever channel it is. We can block that. We have the power. It can be done. What we don't have, and it's what Governor B was talking about, it's about profit before people. We've got to turn that around. And this may sound a bit biblical, and I apologize for anyone, but we are at our BC AD moment, right? Before coronavirus and after the deaths. We've got to reevaluate what's important and be thankful that people are still alive through the worst pandemic that any of us will live through in our entire lives. So how do we start that? We start that on the football pitch. So when the ref says, and I'll come back to football with this as I'm with West Ham, but when the ref says that's offside or that's that and that's that, the players don't go up and give him a load of abuse or her a load of abuse. Because actually I saw that in the Sunday football that I used to go to with my son. I used to see those kids imitating that behaviour. When a politician says something that is totally inappropriate, and as a leader of national or regional or local, then there should be a mechanism for that person to be told that's not appropriate, including deselection. It should be that communities have the right to say, you do not voice that sort of hatred in our environment, because it's not what we want to see. And it's going to take a lot to do that. And that's why I back what Leroy has been saying for many years. Joe, when Joe asked me to be an ambassador for West Ham, I jumped at the chance because I went through West Ham. I've been a lifelong West Ham fan, but I went through it when I saw the hatred on the terraces, the ICF and all this stuff that was linked around it. It was awful. I didn't enjoy it. People look back at it with rose tinted glasses. Some of the people I grew up with, and even today, they see me as a traitor because I don't believe racism has a place in our society, and hate certainly doesn't have a place. It's Holocaust Memorial Day today. You know, if nothing has taught us what hate does, that should have. But we had, and we saw this only 2 weeks ago in the free world capital, that same hate. Who saw the chap wearing the Camp Auschwitz on his jumper? How can you even produce that? How can you think that that is acceptable? It's hate. So we all have a part to play, and especially online, we need to be calling it out when we see it. And if we don't do that, then actually we're complicit, and that makes us even worse of a character than those that are doing it. Sorry, I had to bring that.
Darren, I think that's all incredibly valid in terms of, and 2 points that you raised there that I think everyone else has also referenced. You talk about the football fans of the 70s and 80s and the hatred environment that was there around the ICF or whatever form it came out on. And the question is, why isn't, you know, where did that go? And I think we've had this conversation before, Darren, how it was suppressed, wasn't it? It was just, you know, that wasn't acceptable in a football ground anymore. So, you know, that it didn't go away in society. And also, if you think about social media, and if you can control or put controls and governance and legislation into how social media companies operate and hopefully don't allow, you know, it doesn't mean that those views and values don't go away. And I think where it leaves us is, you know, over decades, 30, 40, 50 years of greed from many, many areas of the world. And people have now got used to it. As you say, this is generational. People are used to the greed element of, I want it now, I can buy it now, I can get in debt, you know, all of those things that have unfolded. And business and big business are absolutely at the heart of whatever happens going forward. And Darren, as a local politician, I'm sure you can appreciate that the local governments now versus the local governments of 20 years ago are different, and they're going to have a different job to play going forward. And I think the bit around society and the decency that is lacking, and that Leroy and Isaac have referenced, it's lacking. And if there's a job for anyone, because if you put a plaster on social media and you say, you know, you can ban people, you can give them strike, it doesn't mean that that's gone away and their opinions haven't gone away. And I think it's a really key moment, and I like the ADBC reference. You know, we are in one of those reset moments where we do have options now. People are thinking, probably because they've got too much thumb in the hands being locked in the house, but it's given space for us to consider what is actually really important. And for the lion's share of people, we'd all probably agree. And it's making sure that as the generations now grow forward, there is the common value and decency that is needed in society. This is a hard piece of work. This is not just stopping social media platforms from allowing discrimination or views. This is about us as a community. When you say community, what is, you know, is it the neighbourhood? Is it us, me meeting a neighbour down the road for 3 doors down because of the clap for the NHS that I've never seen in 5 years? You know, ridiculous. You know, is it that community we're talking about, or is it based on your faith or your religion, or is it based on the colour of the football kit you put on a Saturday afternoon and your kind of club colours? I think it's all of it. But it starts for us, I think it starts with the young people of the communities that we can engage. We can get to them. They're in school, by and large. They're all in school at a certain age. And like when you see some of the other themes that get endorsed by the Department of Education and it's embedded into curriculum, something like Stop the Hate and programs like that should be embedded from the age of 5 to the age of 11 as a minimum, to give those young people the chance to grow into that subject, to understand it. Indeed, not just a quick, I'm not undermining what we do is stop the hate, but it's very short, sharp, isn't it? The short, sharp intervention. Whereas actually, if it was in curriculum from, I've got 2 boys in primary school, different ages, if they were to learn about this every single term, about hate crime, about tolerance, about decency, around what that means, love, all of that, you know, if they were to learn that over a course of 8-9 years going into secondary school, it gives them more ammunition, doesn't it, about how they can call out a friend who's racist, or they can call out someone who's, and I think, so yes, online is absolutely fundamental in terms of us getting that right. It's deeper and it's going to take longer, but I think there's a bit of a swirl actually. I think people are starting to understand the not only the magnitude but the importance of this kind of topic and conversation.
Joe, yeah, I totally agree about, you know, starting at a young age, but I just think it needs to come from both ways. And I take Darren's point on about football, about, you know, the messages it sends, you know, because it's something that everybody's watching, especially during the pandemic. It's the only thing that people are watching. So it needs to start at the curriculum from young people. It also used to start from football. It also needs to come from a way that Isaac's saying that the music that he makes isn't about violence and anger and all that sort of stuff as well, which I don't know about, but I'm sure it has a detrimental effect on a lot of our young people. So we have to hit it from all angles, but it starts at the top. And one of the things that happened recently was the PFA did that, where a load of footballers came off Twitter for 24 hours for the day, and it had an effect. And it starts from those people who are getting abused, and everybody came off Twitter for 24 hours. And those are the things that have an effect on those companies, because it's their responsibility. And football, but it has to be, and you start at the top and you start at the bottom, then hopefully Sunday we'll meet in the middle and it'll be gone. You know, but it's just as important that you know.
Agree with that, Leroy. And I think there are very clear stakeholders involved here. So when you talk about the football industry, you talk about business, you talk, you know, at the top, you talk about the politicians at the top. I think absolutely it's everybody to have a buy-in, of which they'd all follow a formula, a template, a framework that we could all buy into. Now, you know, again, this is a huge task to get that, but I'm starting to sense that there's some key changes, some really positive changes in some really quite big industries. So when you look in the old money, I suppose, in terms of what companies used to develop around CSR, people even now look at that and say, well, that was a decade ago. CSR's changed. CSR's evolved into an ESG strategy, which even that now is that strong enough? Is what a company, a big business needs to do, is that good enough? Or actually, is this about the board, the stakeholders in that company? Is it about understanding what footprint they have, not only to their customers, but actually much broader than that? What's the footprint of them as a big business in this country? And I think it's looking at all of it, isn't it, Leroy? It's looking at all of it and saying, how would you? So what is the common? What's the centre point, which we're saying it absolutely is around hate or versus tolerance, right? If that's the centre piece, it's getting the right people around, the right task force around. Which Cormac and Suzanne, this is great to have this conversation. I think it's a fantastic start for us, even just to start the conversation. But it's looking at the longer term. What's the next 5 years look like? What does the next 10 years look like in terms of making real change?
Of course,
we have to get it. Sorry, we have to get into that social fabric. So when I was a kid, again, way before you lot, when I was a kid, you could drink and drive. It was acceptable. All right, you went along, you didn't have to clunk click. I still remember the advert, clunk click, yeah, to keep yourself alive, because there wasn't seatbelts in cars. Now, we as a society have said, actually, that's not acceptable. We don't want you not being able to control something that could kill someone. We don't want the safety of that vehicle being compromised so the people in it will die. So actually, it's the same for this. We collectively bring up children. There's an old saying about parents are parents, but the community brings up the child. And I'll go back to what made the leaders of what I call the golden age of football come from Barking and Dagenham. It was the community around Barking and Dagenham. They made the young people, and I'm talking about Bobby Moore, I'm talking about Trevor Brooking, I'm talking about Terry Venables, Jimmy Greaves. They all grew up. Paul Ince, what a fantastic fella Paul Ince is, the Guvna. Yeah. Now, I know some people didn't like the fact that he left West Ham and went to Man United, but you can't say it was wrong for him to better him for what he felt he needed. Yeah. But he's a Dagenham boy. And I only found out it was a couple of months ago now, that he was the first black England captain. I didn't know that. It didn't occur to me because I don't think in that terms, right? Because I see everyone as equal. But when I realised that was the case, I was like, right, we now need to honour what Paul managed to achieve. So he'll get the freedom of the borough of Barking and Dagenham, because he did something. He broke a barrier. He broke that glass ceiling that we should all be striving to do, because that's the only way we're going to get the hatred to the darkness where it needs to be. But we haven't had that. We haven't had that for probably about 15 years. When I was fighting the BNP, I didn't fight the BNP because I wanted something to do. I didn't give up the company I had to do that. I did it because I wanted a community that was together, that believed in each other. Governor B, I won't know your music because, quite frankly, I'm still in the 80s. But it's relevant. It's going to make a difference. It can change people's lives. So how do we empower you to make that happen? Because that's what we need to do. We need you to be proud of the place you come from. People don't know that Barking and Dagenham stopped slavery. I do, because Lord Denman lived here, and his granddaughter and his daughter, his wife is buried here. I know that equal rights came from here because of Mary Wollstonecraft and the women of Fords. I know I have the most diverse council in London of ethnic background. Why? Because I'm proud of those things, because they matter to our whole community. The only way we're going to do this is if we do it together. And I think this is a great start. I think West Ham is a great family club, but our family isn't based on where you come from. It isn't based on what faith you are or what skin colour you happen to have. It's based on values. And that's what I think is so great. And that's why I hope one day Suzanne will come back to Barking and Dagenham, because the work she's done with Cormac has been fantastic, supported by Joe and Leroy. Again, he's just a master. So I bow to his greatness. But I say that as a fan. I say that as a fellow citizen. I say that as a fellow human being. And I'll have to listen to Governor B's music, because it sounds like it's pretty trendy.
Governor B, I was wondering, I know Darren alluded to it there a little bit, but I was wondering if maybe you could give us kind of your perspective from the music industry on this topic, and see what we spoke about in certain language it's used in songs and things like that. What's your perspective on that?
I think there's a lot of things that are synonymous with football and music. One of the things is what Darren just alluded to, about not knowing that there was like the first, England captain or West Ham captain. I can't remember what you said. In music, I think the reason why this topic is so complicated is a lot of it is very nuanced and subtle. So, for example, going to West Ham, I grew up in Canning Town, going to West Ham like 10, 15 years ago is completely different to going to West Ham now. It's a different experience for me. I remember getting off the train at Upton Park and another black guy saying to me, "Oh, just like be careful because it's kicking off." That would never happen now, but I think that translated or tricked me into thinking this isn't a problem anymore. And the reason why social media is a different beast is because it highlights that actually there's people out there that are still hateful. There's people out there that are still racist. And I think in music it's still the same. When you look at the heads of music labels and the people in decision-making positions that have real influence, there's not many black people or mixed race people in those positions. So I think that's very similar to football. But as I say, all these different industries and social media, to me, they're just a reflection of society. And I love what's been said about everyone playing their part. Because to me, you know, whether it's West Ham fan or you're running an organization or you're an ex-footballer, everyone's got a part to play, young or old. You know, I go into schools and one thing I talk about a lot is redefining what success looks like. Don't look at me and think because I've got all these streams and sales and I tour and all that kind of stuff, I'm successful. Or don't look at Wayne Rooney because he's got a certain amount of caps and certain amount of goals and all that kind of stuff. Probably shouldn't have said Wayne Rooney. Should have said someone like Mikel Antonio or something like that. But look at their kindness. Look at how they treat people. Don't worry about what car I drive or what house I've got. Think about how I make people feel. Think about how I respect people. And these kids, they get it and they understand it. But what happens is they'll go on social media and the adults aren't leading by example. There's 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds being racist and hating each other. So I think everyone's got a role to play, but we as older people need to lead by examples, because the kids, surprisingly enough, they actually get it. When they see someone that's relatable, that comes into their school and cuts through, they understand it. But if we're not leading by example, I'm fearful that they'll follow in our footsteps of the negative people in society. One thing I wanted to touch on quickly as well is whether music or football, or you're working in education, we've got to build deeper relationships with people. You know, we aren't all monoliths, we aren't all the same. You know, there's people that have had bad experiences with black people, and so they put all black people in this box, and like, I hate them all. I've had negative experiences with the police force and be unfairly stopped and searched, and they've got guns out and all this kind of stuff. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to treat Susan any different, because she's her own person and she's got different views to another police person. So I think if we build deeper relationships and start to see the one, and by that I mean look at each other as individuals, not you're a black person, so you're like this, you're Asian, so you're like this, you're white, so you're like this, you're a policeman, so you're like this. We've got to build deeper relationships, and I think that would be a big part of just progressing the music scene and the football scene. And one thing I just wanted to say quickly is it reminded me of something that my mum used to say to me a lot when we was growing up. So she's from Ghana, and there's this quote that says, it takes a village to raise a child. And what that means is just everyone in the community, from your shopkeeper to your football club to your teacher to your parents to your next door neighbor. It's a shared responsibility to be a positive person, make a positive impact in society, so everyone feels like they're a family. Because Darren's absolutely right, West Ham is a family club, but when I was getting off the train 10, 15 years ago, it didn't feel like that, because you had people that were looking at me a certain way because I was different. And so I think it's shared responsibility across the board and building deeper relationships with people.
That's fantastic, Governor B. That's a really profound message there. And what you said about kids getting it and kids understanding it, I absolutely agree, because I have this year for our Stop the Hate program, we've been going into schools, discussing the issues with young people. Also this year I've discussed the issues with adults as well, and often the young people are the ones who are actually easier to talk to. They're the ones who understand it better, and they're the ones who really we can influence. And from a comment that happened earlier on in the discussion, I think it was Darren who said kind of we've lost our sense of community, and that's something I agree with, and also something we're certainly at the foundation we're trying to do is to re-establish that that community through our programs and bringing people together. And everything that's been said so far moves us on quite nicely to our next discussion point. And I thought, Suzanne, you'd be good to bring in on this. And it's how is hate crime policed, and what can we all do to help?
So policing it, as I said, is very difficult. Online hate crime is very faceless, and 99% of the time we don't know who's behind that particular email or that post or that, is it meme? If I want to get that right, the pictures behind what people post. But it's also about reporting levels as well. I think if you look at volume of crime, so hate crime, reporting of hate crime is very low. And that's something that I also do a lot to encourage. If you've had an online comment that you find offensive and it's hateful, please report it. Because if I have 92 instances in a month, and I have to say, you know, oh, well, you know, we could do with some more backing to tackle this crime, but unfortunately we've had 992 burglaries. Do I actually think that we've had that many burglaries than we have hate crime? Absolutely not. But it's a very underreported crime because so many people now feel that it's almost accepted. You know, recently with police officers, we weren't allowed to be victims of public order or hate crime. Okay, it's part of our job. That was, so we were allowed to be called names. We weren't, you know, don't talk about it. Don't report it. You know, it's that's what you signed up for. And all of a sudden, we are being recognised that we are human beings, and it is hurtful. And you know, that name calling, as I sort of alluded to earlier. I'm a person behind that jacket, and it's really lovely that people, you know, we can sit here and have this conversation about, you know, Guvna B's had a really negative experience with the police. I would like to hope if that were me, we'd have had a completely different experience, and he would have had a different sort of outlook. And I think that just the more that we understand about hate crime, you know, there's a lot of analysis going on behind the scenes as to who is committing the hate crime, where is it coming from, how do we tackle it? You know, it's not just something that's swept under the carpet, but we do need to hear about all the incidences that take place, whether it be, you know, a name calling from a road rage incident. It doesn't make it right just because you know you've cut somebody up and they decide to, you know, use a derogatory word about you. It's not right that if you leave your place of worship that somebody makes a derogatory comment about, you know, your faith. But the more we hear about these incidences, the more we can record it. That, you know, the investment will be there into, you know, how do we, like tonight, you know, how do we come together? How do we bring that collaborative? And funnily enough, it was one of the things that drove me to, I had a conversation with the Deputy Commissioner. You touched on it earlier with education. So we've seen the introduction now of the, I think PHSE is how they describe it now, with the LGBT books that are now being delivered at a much, you know, sort of lower level, and it's not teaching children about, you know, intimate relationships. It's in fact it's two penguin daddies and the daddy egg. You know, it's actually a really sweet story. But for me, why did the Education Authority not go far enough and then start introducing books about, you know, getting into games or being hurtful or being kind? You know, where is that, you know, that early years learning? Now, I appreciate some of those children will go home and they will have influences from their parents about the way that they've been brought up. And it's very difficult sometimes to tackle that sort of, you know, the social upbringing of some children, but we need to keep trying. So for me, the more, you know, the more that we can get, you know, it reported, then we can then have that, you know, a much broader understanding of why it happens, who it happens to, and then how we can tackle it. Sorry, Joe, did I interrupt you there?
No. I was just listening. In terms of from a football perspective, I think working with some of your colleagues linked to the football clubs has actually been a really eye-opening experience for me to see how the police officers linked to West Ham or Arsenal or Chelsea have really tackled this over the last couple of years. Now, if you think about Leroy back in, I shouldn't say it like this, but back in your day when there were no cameras on the terraces, if there were 10,000 people being incredibly hateful towards you, there was nothing that anyone really could do about that. There was, you know, there was no control mechanism. Whereas now, and obviously I can't go into any details, Suzanne, but you know, there is many live cases open with West Ham and their police service looking directly at people, right? And I think I think it's important to understand that whilst all of those cases, you know, will be pursued as and when and how accurately, it's about the detail of them. So now the clubs themselves are saying, well, for example, if there's a racist connotation to an incident at a stadium, there's then a support team behind that. They'll have to come into the club. They look at a rehabilitation education program that sits behind it before they're banned, potentially, depending on the obviously severity. I think it's different in terms of what we can now do now as a football community, especially then when there's away fans, home fans, and there's now collaboration across all of these football clubs. And I think I've just seen a message come up on my screen.
Sorry, I'll just jump in if you don't mind. Suzanne,
Yeah.
were you saying that it's important to report it as more of a long-term thing because that gives you kind of more data to be able to do something in the future? Because the general consensus amongst the young people that I speak to is if we report it, nothing's going to happen and no one's going to get convicted.
Yeah, no, so absolutely. So there's I don't think that it's probably not publicly known. So if I go out and can we remember this when we used to go out actually and go to the pub and have a few drinks? If I was to go out, have a few drinks, and say some abusive words, not derogatory, but abusive words, so swearing, it's a public order offence, therefore I would get a penalty notice, and I'd have to pay a fine. The decision at the moment is that because hate crime is what they consider to be a severer words into just swearing, they would like that to go to court. Now, that's where we face the difficulties is, it does mean people giving statements. It does mean people going to court. It does mean having to face that perpetrator and possibly, repercussions of that incident. So it is all under discussion at the moment how we can, have different resolutions in order to tackle the hate crime itself. But yes, the more data we have, the more people that report it, we can sense the feeling of, if you're called a name on the street and or in a road rage incident, for example, which is very quick. You're driving down the A13 through Dagenham, somebody hollers a name at you. Are you going to want to give up your time to go to court, give a statement, take the day off work? Because if you're self-employed, unfortunately, we don't pay you to take that day off, but we want you to support us in our prosecution. So, that's a little bit of a mixed message there, isn't there? So there is a lot of work being done behind the scenes, but we would encourage absolutely every incident to be reported, because 9 times out of 10, I'm not going to fluff it up or lie to you. It won't get as far as court because we won't have the witness statements, or we won't, the person who's been the actual victim doesn't want to follow it through for those very reasons. But actually, although that's not the end result that I'd like to see, the more that we do see, the more then we can drive the fact that it is more of a problem than probably the stats are showing. And I think that for me is why I like to push it further and further. I want to hear about every footballer's name calling. I want to hear, so is it 100 people or is it one? Well, I would sense it's probably 100 people. And in Leroy's case, it probably sounds like it was far more, and actually tackling that group of people is a really good way, and that's a really strong message. If I've got my football expert sergeant actually on the call, so he will pop in and correct me if I'm wrong at any point. But it is about working with the football clubs to make sure that banning orders can be put in place. They are following their hate crimes right through to the end and investigating them fully. So absolutely,
it goes further than that though as well, Suzanne. So the message that I saw on the bottom of my screen was from Andy Sheldon, our West Ham officer, who does an amazing job in terms of coordinating this for West Ham and linking in with other clubs. And I think where that's led to is there's stuff that we can do on a match day experience, for example, and using cameras and sophisticated technologies now to really, if someone throws a banana, as was the game last season, if 3 or 4 people absolutely abuse one of the players, as one of the other London club's fans did last year. You can see them, you can pinpoint them, and you can then take the necessary action. I think the key, and I've heard very promising conversations currently around what does that mean to, I don't know, a West Ham player who gets abused by a small percentage of an opposition fans. You know, you don't go to work, or I say that as a police officer, maybe it's not the right example, but you know, you don't go to work in an office and expect to do a bad job and send a bad email and go to the water cooler and get abused by other firms. You know, it doesn't happen. So why can it happen in a football stadium? And I think in partnership with the police and in terms of their operations that they run during match days, it's also getting the players. So if you had the club of West Ham, the club captain of Chelsea, both talking to their fans to dampen, you know, and those sort of things are actually in conversation linked to the no room for racism campaigns that the Premier League are endorsing, and now some of the other clubs are coming together, because nobody wants to go to work and receive that kind of abuse and hate crime against them, regardless of the tone or what the actual subject is, or whether or not they've just scoffed a shot into Rose Ed. You know, it's kind of saying, listen, no, this can't continue. This cannot continue in the way that it was shown last year and a few years ago, as the cases unfolded. But actually, as a group of people collectively, with the right ammunition behind them and the police services that come in, I think there's some green shoots in terms of people have missed football. People want to come back to football now once the fans are back. I heard a March the 8th date in terms of schools reopening today. So maybe that's green shoots in terms of when that can start to happen over the Darren's nodding. It's not going to be as early as March 8th. I'm sure it isn't. But you know what I mean? Once those fans come back, hopefully with a reinvigorated desire to come and watch football, and the messaging increases, and we've got cases where people know that, Jesus, I can't be doing that because the guy who's sitting next to me is banned for football for life. He's never going to watch it again because of what he was just abusing the player at the corner flag. I think it's all of it. Again, that's one thing that we as football clubs and the power that a club captain or a badge behind it can have in terms of really trying to educate fans around the impact of some of the things that they get up to.
But also, sorry, Darren, can I just so I don't forget, I'm getting to that age now. So on that point, I think because football is so big, and we were having this conversation around earlier with Cormac, because obviously this is my world, and these conversations are happening all the time, is the different sports, you know. But I think football has an impact on everybody's life, regardless of whether you're a football fan or not. Okay. I mean, I've got the mighty Dagenham and Redbridge Football Club in Dagenham. So I've got, you know, I love the club. I've got a great affinity for that, and the great job they do around Daggers for Diversity, which, you know, is a really great campaign that they have. And you know, you see things taking place. You know, like, oh, there he is. He's got it on. Yeah, you know, I think. If people see, oh, that person went to a football match and now they've lost that season ticket and they've lost that money because they couldn't, you know, they couldn't control their speech, because you're right, there is that freedom of speech. But to me, speaking freely is not being hateful. It's about having a conversation about our differences. I'd like to think that me and Guvna B could have a conversation about music. He's probably not going to agree with my classical choices, but I bet we could have a really, really good conversation about it and just agree to disagree of what's good music and what's not. And I'm really sorry, I'm not saying your music is bad.
I don't mind a bit of classical.
But no, honestly. But this is what I'm saying. You know, it's about having those open discussions. But I think football has a real influence in people's lives because it's on the telly so much. You know, it's in the news, and if that hard-hitting message is, you know, people are getting banned from football matches and they can't do this and they can't do that because that hate speech, and that is as a direct result of, you know, our football expert team that we've got. I'm a borough-based officer, so I work in what we call borough policing, whereas, you know, Andy's on a team with Sergeant Hine, and they do, you know, an amazing job within that expertise football team that they've got. And it's really good to hear that actually it's working, and we're having the effect that we want to have. And I want to kind of take on almost their success and move it in to show people, look, this is what hate means. If you're hateful to people, this is the consequence. And if we can do it in football, guess what? We're going to do it in rugby, in tennis, in, you know, because you don't want to just stop with football. You know, racism needs to be stamped out of society, full stop, as does hate. So it's really, you know, it's lovely to hear, and like I say, they do an amazing job, and you know that's why they're here on the call with me today, because it's thanks to their hard work that you know I'm in a position to do what I do today. So yeah.
The thing is though, Suzanne, where I wanted to come in is it goes much further than what you guys just do on the Saturday or in your jobs, because actually that person you've just banned from the football club may be an employee of the local council. Yeah, we have a zero tolerance in that. You will be sacked. Okay. I know, walking around Dagenham, in fact, I live very close to Dagenham and Redbridge, hence why I'm wearing the sweatshirt. I live on Reed Road. Okay. I saw all the racist graffiti that was around when Black Lives Matter was going on. We need to acknowledge that this intolerance is there, because actually what we also need to do is get government to actually put the money in that helps the education of defeating the problem. And that's why this is so important. That's why I go back to say, when I got into politics, to fight the BNP, to think that a place had felt so isolated from its wider community that it felt the far right was an answer. It's what happened in America. You know, there's a whole displacement of people. So we've got to give everyone the feeling of value. They are valued within our society. It doesn't matter what background, what you know, what skin color. It doesn't matter. So what you guys do on you think is just what you do. Actually, for us as local government, that is massive. Us for a community, it's even bigger. I remember those days when the NF used to march over the Heathway Hill. I remember when the first black family moved into my part of Dagenham, and the first Asian family. I got my head kicked in because I befriended the young man at the time, back in the 70s. You know, neither of us could walk home. That's how intolerant it absolutely was. Now, I've got people that will go, but Dagenham was a wonderful place back in the 70s. It was, if you weren't black, Asian, gay, or different, if you conformed to what they expected, that you were fine. But if you didn't, it was a horrible place. So what we've got to do is show that difference is our strength. Proper patriotism, whatever way you want to guise that, is linked to our difference, you know, and we celebrate what makes us different, and that takes all of us. And you know, again, Governor B, I dare say my musical tastes are probably identical to him, because we have a wide viewpoint of the world. Now, it might be that I'm pretty stuck in a particular era, but I can appreciate some of the stuff today. What I can't appreciate is when I hear music that talks about hate, whether that's derogatory to women, to other sexualities, whatever. I don't accept that as music. I accept that as hate. Now, online, it escalates even more. And we've got young men as primarily being killed for the music they make. And it's all about hate. And we've got to change that.
And Darren, we've got two very strong mediums here in terms of football sport, so football and music. And really, people can engage with that. And we said it at the beginning, it really cuts through some of the barriers that we do have to get the educational message. And actually, as a result of the pandemic, one thing we've seen, like tonight, we're all virtually, you know, if we tried to pull the team together in the old days, pre-2020, it would have been very difficult for diaries, for people logistically. Now, it's very easy. And myself and Leroy were chatting this week to the team with the team at West Ham around Stop the Hate, saying, how could we take this to 92 clubs? Is it possible? Could we work with the Premier League, with the Football League Trust, with the Show Race and Regard? And the answer is yes. If we could get Leroy and Isaacs to do a double team effort on Zooms to educate all the young people in this country, like, again, pre-COVID, you'd say it's impossible. It isn't impossible now. And I think there's something in that in terms of really positive messaging that can come out from the Stop the Hate program or other educational programs that can reach everybody, but it has to be, I suppose it has to be championed by the powers that be, and that's for us now to do over the next couple of months, use the momentum and just to try and get as much traction as we can.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think music and football are things that a lot of people love, and it's almost like the bait on the end of the fishing rod. When you get people in, and that's when you can really make change. I've been talking a lot about the current West Ham team and how we can draw inspiration from that. And the reason why it's my favourite era now is because, you know, like when Payet was with us in 2016, I think it was, he was like one standout player. And there was a couple of others, but it wasn't like a real team effort. Not everyone was playing well at the same time. And so when things are like that, when there's only one person standing up for the right thing or one person fighting against it, it's much harder. But now I love the fact that no one's the big star, but everyone's chipping in together. Every single position, everyone's working hard. And I think that's very representative of the approach that we can take. You know, I think there's just enough people on the right side that want to be on the right side of history. And because of that, we can make a real difference.
Absolutely, Governor B. It's been a really great and really powerful conversation. So thank you everyone, panelists, for your comments. And I'm just conscious of time. So there's a couple of things I want to mention that ties in really nicely to the points about football being very powerful, and the Players Project at West Ham United is something that we take great pride in, and something that that they've been really involved with in terms of the Stop the Hate project, standing for all the values that we've spoken about today: inclusivity, equality and diversity, and that's kind of it, you know, and having our players on board with that, embedded into the program is really strong. And one of the final, well, there's two more questions I want to ask, and I'm conscious of time. I know we're getting close to 5:30, but Leroy, I wanted to bring you back in, because we spoke a lot about reporting hate crimes and racism, and you know, the success rates of that reporting. And I just wanted to get your viewpoint on what advice would you give to someone who has maybe suffered a racist incident, you know, unfortunately suffered a racist incident, you know, someone's been racist to them. What advice would you give to that person?
Well, the most important thing is to, when something like that happens, is there someone you can talk to? And that's the first thing you need to do. Just talk about it and get it out, because when it happens to an individual, a lot of people think it's about them. You know, when somebody abuses them, they take it on it almost internally. It must be something wrong with them. It isn't. It's to do with the perpetrator. So to talk about someone and to report it. And I come back to that point that Suzanne made and Isaac was asking about, you know, young people think nothing ever happens, but you need to report it, especially in school. If you're in school, you know, and you go to your headmaster and report it, it looks like nothing's happening, but it's being logged. And you get a pattern of behavior, and you get a pattern of who's the perpetrator, and then eventually something will will happen, because you're building evidence. So you need to talk about it. And the thing about talking about it is, not only are you doing yourself a lot of good, you're doing other people a lot of good as well. You know, what happens then by you being brave and reporting it and talking about it means that there's a good chance it won't go and happen to someone else. And I think you don't realize that, just how difficult it is. We do understand how difficult it is to talk about it, to report it in certain instances, in certain environments where you're around these people all the time. But you might be doing a service for your little brother or your little sister. You might be doing a service for someone you don't even know, you've never met, but you are doing a real service for somebody. And it goes a long way to dealing with hate crime, with racism in your community. And I always say to people that you can't change the world, but you can change your own little world. You know, you can change your own little world where you are. And if you're prepared to stand up and be brave, because being brave isn't calling people names, being brave is standing up to it in the right way. You know, Isaac said about punching someone in the mouth. Sometimes when you punch someone in the mouth, they'll punch you back, and then the argument's forgotten. So, you know, violence usually doesn't lead to a really good resolution, but talking about it does lead to a good resolution because it's dealt with in the correct way. And when I mean the correct way, I like to feel that there are some people who are just ignorant. And if you're prepared to have that conversation with them, you'll stop them being ignorant. There are some people who are just racist, and they'll always be racist, and there's nothing you can do about that, in all honesty. But it's those people who are ignorant, who are uneducated, who I'm really concerned about, that if we can get them to listen and to talk, and in my experience, a lot of those people, because I've taken the time to speak to them or they've had that conversation, have turned from being ignorant and not turned into a racist, but turned into someone who has become an anti-racist. And that's what we need to do if we are to move forward. Turn those people who were prepared to listen at this moment, who want to be anti-racist. And I always say this to a lot of people, when you allow something to happen, you are just as culpable, you know, because you're allowing it to grow. So saying I'm not racist isn't good enough. You need to be an anti-racist and say that's not acceptable, and this is why it isn't acceptable, and you're turning that person into an anti-racist as well, and that's how we'll move forward.
Leroy, that point, sorry, Leroy, that point around being anti-racist is something that, you know, you taught me that. And you know, it was only over the last few years working with you, you taught me that. And, you know, I talk about it really honestly. You know, I've got my own WhatsApp groups with friends that I grew up with 40 years ago. And, you know, we were in an Irish-Italian school in North London. And, you know, I'm still friends with a lot of these people who have gone into being a decorator or being a plumber or whatever. And what do you do when they're racist? And you're talking about people you've known for 40 years. What do you do? Do you laugh, go along with it, which probably happened a lot in time? Or I suppose more recently, people say, "Well, I can't be associated with that WhatsApp group. I've got to leave." Or, and something you've taught me is you say, "Listen," and you private message. Or if you think you can do it, you call them out. And you watch people squirm, and you watch people suddenly say, "Oh, geez, oh God." You know, and listen, Leroy, getting to know you over the last few years, you've kind of given me the ammunition to do that on a personal level. Being at work's very easy because you follow your code of conduct and you've got your values as an organisation. And, you know, but when you've got your family in the couch and you've got the old uncle that you think you're putting your hands in your head, and it is about being anti, it is about being opposed to. And I think it's such an important message that we need that kind of strength to then tackle things that are online that are even harder because you can't see them. But I think that's such a good point, Leroy.
Thank you. I do feel that being uncomfortable is a good thing, because it isn't a comfortable thing. That racism or hate or sexism, all these things aren't comfortable. But I'll tell you why they're not comfortable, because when you're on the end of it, it's the most uncomfortable thing you could ever experience. So to have a little conversation that might be uncomfortable for a small period of time before you get to the other side, where people say, you know what, no one's ever talked to me like that, no one's ever pointed that out, is worth it, by the way. That bit of discomfort is well worth it. And it is nerve-wracking, it is worrying, especially, and you know what, it's more worrying if you're not Black. It's more worrying if you haven't experienced it, but you know it. It's more difficult. It's easier for me, and it's easier for Isaac. It's easier if you're of color. It's easier if you're a woman, if you're talking about sexism, because you've been on the end of it. But if you're not, that's an even more difficult conversation, but it's one you need to be prepared to have, because you are doing a service for myself, for Isaac, for Suzanne, for as a woman, that will stop it happening to your daughter or to your friends. And that's the key. It's not just for me and Isaac or Suzanne to challenge it all the time. It's for Cormac and Darren and Joe, who are all prepared to do it, because it is just as powerful coming from them as well.
Yeah, and that falls into the question I often get asked in schools is, whose responsibility is it to tackle racism? And the really easy answer to that is it's every single one of us. You know, it's all of our individual responsibility to tackle that problem. It's not just our teachers, it's not just the police, it's not just the justice system to enforce that. It's every single person in society is responsible for building a happy and inclusive environment for everyone, whether that's face-to-face or online, whichever way, because now the two worlds that they're beginning to merge now, and we're in a world now which is just as much digital as it is is personal and face-to-face contact. So that's the big message, I think, is to get out from what you say there, Leroy. I think that's really powerful. And now we're on to our final question, which I'll come to all of you for this one, so you can all give your view. Is how can we make the biggest positive change when it comes to racism, and what are your hopes for the future? So Darren, just because you're at the top of my screen, I'll come to you first for that one.
Oh, that's because, you know, I've got to go soon. I was supposed to be on another meeting, but I've enjoyed this one so much that I blew that one out. So this is so important. This is going to be a fight every day of every one of our lives and beyond, the same as it was before we were born, because instinctively there will be people that are jealous of other people. It may be wealth, it may be ability, it may be history, but they will have that problem because they've been taught to have that problem. Now we will never stop this, but we do need to stand up when it rears its ugly head. And I say that because, as I say, I've experienced it here. As someone, and Leroy's, he's got a point here. I grew up in the same period of time as my friends did, and family members. I've got family members who won't speak to me now. I'm because I'm not one of them. I'm a traitor, and they really believe it. I mean, it's incredible because they conformed to that thinking. And you know, there are some people, again, Leroy's right, we'll never change that mindset. But what we've got to do is call it out every time we see it. And it doesn't matter what it is, any ism, as I call it, any ism, we've got to stop. My daughter went to a Catholic school and they told her that she was wrong to believe in gay marriage. Now, my wife's Catholic, yeah? I took her out of that school because she came home in tears. That's just breeding negativity, hatred in whatever guise that is, and we just need to fight it one day after the next day after the next day. But we need to champion the people that have made the difference. And you know, Guvna B, Leroy, Suzanne, they make the difference every day because they're prepared, as Leroy said, to speak up about it. Cormac, you're the same. You know, we've got to champion you because you're taking that message out there and you're on the front line of trying to push back the hate. And it will never stop. Don't ever think it'll ever stop, because it won't. But we've got to be ready for it at all times, because when you can have the most powerful person in the world putting out hatred in the way that that person did, then it shows it can get anywhere. And as I said earlier, this is not party political. This is about being a human being. I think our Prime Minister should not be in the position he is because of the language he has used in the past, recent past, about people of difference. Yeah, and it's just not acceptable. But this is going to be a fight, and we've got to carry that banner. And just because I do have to go, actually, I've got assembly in 5 minutes. Guvna B, if we could get in touch with each other after this, I'm not sure if Leroy can come and have a sing-song with us as well, but later this year, we've got the Becontree Forever, which is 100 years of the Becontree estate, of the council estate that I still live on. And we are going to have an event with Love Music, Hate Racism, because you know what? I want to stuff it to all those bigots out there, to all those people that believe difference is against, yeah, the little Britain, the people that are in that world. And let's celebrate our difference, because that's what makes us united, and that's what makes us West Ham, and that's what makes us a community, and that's what makes us great in Great Britain. I love it. So I have to apologise. Thank you for coming to me first. I thought that was very well chaired, Cormac. And Suzanne, I look forward to you being the commissioner. Leroy, I saw you at your best, but you're still a wonderful man. Joe, well, you are a Tottenham boy, but we'll let you off for that charitable round here as well. But Guvna B, I look forward to listening to some music and being enlightened by your attitude.
Thank you, Darren. Thank you very much for being on, Darren. You know, there's some really pertinent, powerful points there. So Governor B, I'll come to you next. Is how do you think we can, just to finish off, how do you think that we can make the biggest positive change in tackling racism, and what are your hopes for the future?
It's such a big issue. I don't know if there's one thing, so I'll probably just talk about what comes to mind first, and it's accountability. I think accountability is something we can all do for each other. You know, accountability, I view, is just helping your world to be responsible. So I guess my hope for the future, and if I was to put a challenge out, it would be if you've got a friend or know someone that is hateful online or racist or anything like that, you have to challenge them. You have to tell them it's wrong, because if you don't, it means you're okay with it. I view the world as our house, you know, and if someone comes into my house and they don't take their shoes off, I've got a nice carpet, I'm going to tell you to take your shoes off because it's my house. I don't say, well, I've got my shoes off and that's enough. They can do what they want. It doesn't work like that. I think in life, there's leaders and there's followers. And if you aren't leading, you're following. And I get it. I get sometimes it's daunting and overwhelming, but we have to try and be brave, because if you aren't brave enough to stand up for the right thing, I think you're following. And I think we can all lead. I remember one of my biggest regrets is on the way back from Cardiff after the playoff final, there was a Preston North End fan and he was getting bullied by some of our fans. Started off as banter and got a bit more serious. And I could have stood up for him, but I didn't. And that's always kind of eaten me alive a little bit, because I'm like, he needed someone to stand up for him. And I think if we all look for someone in our community that we can stand up for, maybe they're not brave enough themselves, maybe we can help them. Then we've got to put ourselves forward and be brave and be there for other people. But yeah, I just focus on accountability and looking at our world and think, who can we challenge and who can we help be a responsible member of society? You're on mute, mate. Had to be one. Had to be one.
It was, I went an hour and 45 minutes without doing it. All right. Thank you, Governor B, for being on the panel, and thank you for your response. I thought it was very powerful, and certainly the point on standing up for each other and standing up for people who maybe don't have a voice definitely is absolutely right. And you've got a book out, haven't you, Governor B, on the 18th of February?
Yeah, so
Unspoken.
It's about toxic masculinity and how in society the role of the man seems to be brave, macho, don't cry, and all that kind of stuff. But actually, I think some of my best moments and my most freer moments have been from being vulnerable with the people around me. So it's just kind of challenging that narrative.
Excellent. I'm sure that'll be a great read. Leroy, I'll come to you next. How do you think we can make the biggest positive change against racism, and what are your hopes for the future?
Well, look, my hopes for the future is that my children, my grandchildren don't go through anything near as much as I went through. Those are my hopes. How do we make change? I look at it in two ways. I always got this top-down, bottom-up approach to things, and hopefully then if we're working hard enough, we meet in the middle. From the top down, I try to explain to people, it doesn't matter about what your motivation is. But if you've got a board which has one white middle-aged man, one disabled person, one woman, one black man, one person of mixed heritage, you'll get better decisions. It's not about, and you'll make more money. If your motivation is making more money, fine, I haven't got a problem with that. But if your leaders reflect society, you will get better decisions. And I want to persuade people that that's why they should make changes at the top. Because it's a value to you. It makes sense. Whether you just, and I don't want tokenism. I want people who are in positions because they're good at their jobs, and it has better outcomes, and it has a positive effect on society. I think that's really, really important. From the bottom up, I think a really important message isn't just about, we've talked about hate crimes and people saying horrible things and being racist, but the most impactful things on our society are the subtle things. And you know, I spend a lot of time now explaining about white privilege, about what white privilege is. And when people hear those two words, white privilege, they think I'm having a go at them because they're white and they've got loads of money. Well, that's not what it is. You know, and explaining what white privilege is and the effect it has on our society is really important. And white privilege is if you're, I always explain it that if you're swimming through the sea, you know, if I'm a black fish and I'm swimming through the sea and I see two white fish, and I say to them, "How's the water today?" And they go, "What's water?" And the reason why they say that is because they're not aware of the flow of the water and how the temperature of the water. As a black man, we are aware, or black person, sorry, we're aware of the temperature of the water and how the water is flowing. And what I mean by that is when we walk into a shop, that we have to make sure that we put our hands behind our back so that the person that behind the shop counter doesn't think we're going to steal something. That doesn't happen to white people. And that's what white privilege is. It's just how things are. And that's what we need to change. And when you go into a workplace and as a woman, you feel threatened when they're saying sexist jokes, but they don't understand the effect, the accumulative effect that has on the female within that workplace over a period of time, how detrimental it is to their confidence and their performance, so that they can't go on to achieve what they need to achieve because of something that might be seen as a little joke. All these things that happen in society that people don't see as being important, but are massively important, that have a detrimental effect on individuals in our society. And so that's my message for people. Don't think that anything small change is not worth it. It's not worth it. All those small things make a big difference to our society. So my hope is that one day that we're not talking about racism. I'll most probably not be here, to be honest, but my hope is that we live in, you know, my kids are mixed heritage, and we're not talking about difference in terms of color. And that, you know, but people say, you know, I don't see color. It's a fact that you do see color. The first thing people saw when my face was on that screen was that I was as black. But that's not a problem. That's a good thing, because it's a way of where you're from, what you're up to, what you do. You know, we do see color, and it's a good thing because it opens up a conversation. But one day, hopefully, we won't really see color because it's just been a norm.
Thank you, Leroy. That's a fantastic message, and you do great work for Show Racism the Red Card and with us for Stop the Hate. So thank you for everything that you do. And Joe, I'll go to you next for the final question.
I'm very conscious of time, Cormac, so I'll keep this as short as I can. I think everything that Leroy and Isaac and Darren have said, I'm not going to repeat. And I think over the next decade or so, however long it's going to take, and Leroy, I hope you're around to see the fruition of your labour and your efforts. It has to be, and it's the village analogy again. It has to be done by everyone, and so for me, in my position at West Ham and the network of organisations and institutions we have around us, it is about putting aside the funding bids and who's going to own this piece of territory and who's going to get the award for the best. Stop the hate, you know, forget all of that, right? This is about total collaboration, and there is enough resources in those institutions and partnerships that we're talking about that can really start to make a difference. And so look, we've already spoken about it internally, that's our focus for the next decade. That's our focus, to ensure that we get best practice from other people, we give our best practice out, and we work in collaboration to try and solve some of these really hot topics, not just around racism and how to really embed our I suppose our programs and anti-racism focus, but then looking at some deeper ones around inequality, health inequality, some of the issues that's been caused over the last 10, 20, 30 years. So all of it in the same, you can't, it's like with disability, you can't categorize this thing. You can't just say, right, we're going to put that into that compartment, and that, you know, it's got to be all in. And I think there's a lot of people that are absolutely all in now, and I agree with Isaac's saying, there's a lot of people now who are swelling in the right direction, and it's really whether or not it becomes political in terms of left or it's not about that, it's about being balanced. And if we can all do that, and we can all collectively work together for the next decade, whatever it's going to take, but have that as a goal. So yeah, that's what yeah, I think it's a positive conversation to be having in what is quite a negative environment at the moment. So
thank you, Joe.
Yeah.
Suzanne, anything to add, Suzanne?
So mine's going to be very short and sweet, and it kind of picks up on Leroy's thing about when people are hateful towards people, they think it's them with the problem. So I will end on saying, when a flower doesn't bloom, you fix the environment in which it grows, not the flower. And that's what I want to do. I want to fix the environment in which we grow, so that we can all blossom to be who we should be. And it doesn't matter how wealthy that is, that makes us, because I consider myself a very wealthy person. I certainly don't live in a big house. I don't drive a 4x4, but I have my health, I have my family, you know, and they always say you're very lucky if you find yourself in someone's thoughts, their hearts and in their prayers. So that would be how I'd like to end it, in that kind of quite a sentimental way, because, you know, it's lovely to come together and have this message so that we can make these changes. And I'll be on to Darren about not getting the invite to that party that he's going to be having with Guvna being Leroy, you know. So yeah, but yeah, so that would be like, I think that would be my closing comments. And yes, let every flower grow to its full potential.
Thank you, Suzanne. That's very powerful metaphor. Thank you to the panel for all your comments and all your efforts today. It's been a fantastic discussion. I know you're all incredibly busy people, so thank you for taking the time to speak today. Thank you to all the attendees for sticking with us. I know we went over time. Thank you for viewing, and I hope you enjoyed listening to the conversation. And I'm sure everyone agrees that it's a really important issue. And I hope that everyone took, even if it was just one message or one thing that they can change, even if it's a small thing. I hope everyone watching managed to get something out of it. So thank you everyone for watching, and thank you to the panelists for taking part.